All right, Z Nation, another book summary. Here we go of part 2, chapter 4. I do believe. Is this chapter 4? Yeah, chapter 4. Chapter 4, How to Win Friends and Influence People. An easy way to become a good conversationalist. This chapter is focusing on the principle: be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves. I love this part. This quote from Jack Woodford, who wrote Strangers in Love: few human beings are proof against the implied flattery of rapt attention. Rapt attention. Rapt. R-A-P-T. Being completely fascinated by what one is seeing or hearing. I went further than giving him rapt attention. I was hearty in my approbation and lavish in my praise. A quote that has been uttered before in this book, going back to compliments and such. Again, good listener. This coming from a former Harvard president, Charles W. Eliot. Eliot says, listening was not merely silence, but a form of activity. Sitting very erect on the end of his spine with hands joined in his lap. I said Eliot was saying this is actually James. Eliot himself was the past master of Henry. So a great novelist. Well, there's a lot of great novelist quotes in here. Henry James, one of America's first great novelists, recalled Dr. Eliot's listening was not mere silence, but a form of activity. Sitting very erect on the end of his spine with hands joined in his lap, making no movement except that he revolved his thumbs around each other faster or slower. He faced his interlocutor and seemed to be hearing with his eyes as well as his ears. He listened with his mind and intently considered what you had to say while you said it. At the end of the interview, the person who had talked to him felt that he had his say. Self-evident, isn't it? You don't have to study this for 4 years in Harvard to discover that. Yet I know, and you know, department store owners who will rent expensive space, buy their goods economically, dress their windows apparently, spend thousands of dollars in advertising, and then hire clerks who haven't the sense to be a good listener. Good listener, that is where it's at. I pride myself on being an attentive, openness listener. So, I mentioned an example of a department store, such, and how a manager listened when the clerk wouldn't listen, and how that manager essentially saved a customer from leaving their business. Again, there's just so many examples in each principle. It's really, really neat to see. It really helps grasp the concept really well. And sure, the principles, when you first read the principles, they seem extremely apparent as far as what they're representing. But you get a bigger sense of it when you read through the chapter itself, from all of the different examples that are provided, that are real-world examples that are very applicable to these principles. Isaac F. Mackelson, a journalist who interviewed hundreds of celebrities, declared that many people fail to make a favorable impression because they don't listen intently. Quote, they have been so much concerned with what they are going to say next that they do not keep their ears open. The very important people have told me that they prefer good listeners to good talkers, but the ability to listen seems rarer than almost any other good trait. I like this bit about how Lincoln, when focusing on the decision whether or not to free slaves, he called on an old neighbor who used to live at the White House. The old neighbor called at the White House, and Lincoln talked to him for hours about the advisability of issuing a proclamation freeing the slaves. Lincoln hadn't wanted advice. He had wanted merely a friendly, sympathetic listener to whom he could unburden himself. That's what we all want when we are in trouble. This is frequently all the irritated customer wants, and the dissatisfied employer or the hurt friend. I can relate this back to, actually, from The Go-Giver. I believe it was one of law number 3 or 4. I want to say it's law 4 of the stratospheric success laws, where, is the main character named Joe? I feel like the main character's name is Joe. He actually listens to his wife, who was having a rough time at night, and he listened to her all night, kind of thing, before she cried herself to sleep. But that meant so much to her, and that's just the power of listening. Oh. So this old neighbor friend for Lincoln, helped Lincoln out a lot just by listening to Lincoln figure out for himself what exactly he wanted to do. And that's why I think a lot of us would like, as listeners, the ability for somebody to listen to our problems, us talk about ourselves. To sum up, remember that the people you are talking to are 100 times more interested in themselves and their wants and problems than they are in you and your problems. A person's toothache means more to that person than a famine in China, which kills 1 million people. A boil on one's neck interests one more than 40 earthquakes in Africa. Think of the next time you start a conversation. Principle 4, like I said earlier in this video, be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves. Chapter 4 in the book from part 2, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Boom.